All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Catherine from SEB Housing, and this is the information session for the 30 affordable rental units that are going to be offered at Slade Farm Residences in Somerset. So the purpose of this session is to give a little bit of background information on the available units. I'll also talk about the application, eligibility, and lottery processes, and then what to expect after the lottery takes place. So if you have any questions, you're encouraged to ask them either by typing them into the Zoom chat, or when you came into the meeting, you were muted. So we just ask that you can unmute yourself, obviously, for a question, but we have it formatted that way just to minimize any outside noise. And then this is a live session too. It's being recorded. So anyone who wasn't able to join us that wants to view it after the fact can do so on SEB Housing's YouTube channel. So just for some background information on who we are before I get into the information about the apartment. So SEB Housing, we are an off-site affordable housing consulting group. So we're not the on-site management team for the building. We have been hired by the developer to market the affordable units, conduct the information session, collect and review lottery applications as they come in order to determine an applicant's eligibility for the affordable housing program. So in the initial phases of this process, SEB Housing is your main contact. But then further along in the process, the on-site management team at Slade Farm will be taking over sort of as your main point of contact when you tour the property and when you're completing the lease screening. So there's a few steps in the process. The first is to first apply for the lottery. If you're found to be eligible for the program based off of what you self-report on your application, SEB Housing will enter you into the lottery, and you will be put in touch with the leasing office after the lottery is run for a lease screening. So that lease screening is separate from the screenings that you'll have with SEB Housing. So it might include a credit check, background check, reference checks, that sort of thing that you might be familiar with from renting elsewhere. And if you pass their lease eligibility screening, you'll be able to reserve one of the affordable units. So after lease eligibility, you're sent back to SEB Housing to complete your program certification, which that is the point in the process where you have to submit supporting documentation like pay stubs, bank statements, that sort of thing, because to get into this lottery, so to be found eligible for the lottery itself, you only need to complete the application self-reporting what your income is. But it's later on in the process that you're asked to actually submit verifying information. So if you haven't already, I'm going to go back to the first slide here on the screen. So our website has a link to the online application. So if you go to sebhousing.com and you click on affordable housing opportunities, you'll select I want to rent since this is a rental opportunity, and you'll see that there is a section for residents at Slade Farm. If you click on that, you'll be taken to a specific page with downloadable versions of the lottery application, the information packet, as well as the JotForm online application, which has that hyperlink that you can see on your screen now. So we encourage everybody to complete the application online. It is the quickest way to ensure that your application is received right away. Once you've submitted that online application, you're going to receive an instantaneous confirmation email, just really that bounces back to you saying you've submitted an application. If for any reason the online application is not a option for you, there is a PDF version of the application that you can fill out electronically or print out and fill out, and then you can scan it to us, you can email it to us. You would just send it to info@sebhousing.com. If someone is filling out a paper application, we usually still get it by email. But you can also mail it into us as well. So there's a few different ways to get the application into us. We just encourage everyone to do it online if they can. And so it shouldn't take you all that long to complete because, like I said, you don't need to submit any supporting information at this time. So No, you don't have to staple any documents. You don't have to upload any documents. It's just when you're filling out the lottery application, you're doing your best to self-report what your total household income is. Applications are due by July 8th. It says 2 p.m. because the online application will shut down at that time. So if you're trying to access it after 2 o'clock on July 8th, it won't work. So just know that 2 p.m., that's the deadline on July 8th. So a little bit less than a month left to get your application in if you're interested. And then I want to mention, too, that you don't need to be a resident of Somerset to apply for this lottery. There are going to be some affordable units that will have local preference for residents of Somerset. So that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes, but just know that that shouldn't deter anyone from applying. It is expected that the first affordable apartments are going to be ready for occupancy in August, with additional apartments becoming available in October. The leasing office will be able to provide you with an updated timeline when you're during the lease screening process. So that's kind of the updated information we have now on that. So Slade Farm Residences, this is a brand new development located in Somerset. So the community is going to have 2 buildings, and they have elevators. There's going to be a total of 120 rental units. 30 of those are a part of this lottery, and they're going to be leased to households with incomes at or below 80% of the area median income. So the rents that you see on your screen right now are the rents that have been calculated by the affordable program. And the units, just to go over a couple quick things about the units. So there is in-unit laundry. The tenants will be paying for electric heating, cooking, hot water, electricity, water, and sewer charges. There is free parking, free surface parking included for residents. And if you're looking for a accessible unit, there is 1 one-bedroom and 1 two-bedroom that have mobility accessible features. So those are considered disabled accessible units. And then there's also 1 two-bedroom and 1 three-bedroom that has hearing impairment accessible features as well. So for the 30 total units, the affordable units, the breakdown is 16 one-bedroom units with a rent of $1,609. There's 11 two-bedroom units with a rent of $1,752. And then there's 3 three-bedroom units with a rent of $1,882. Those affordable rents are not set in accordance with an applicant's income or financial circumstances. They have been set using a formula that is based off of HUD, so the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development area median income for the Somerset, Fall River area. And the rents may increase once per year. That typically occurs after HUD revises their area median incomes, which happens each spring. If you were to sign a lease for August 1st, for example, or September, your rent would stay the same for at least 12 months. So the rent would never change within a lease term, and you would always be given several months notice of any change in rent. So since we know that we already know that there is more interested and eligible applicants than there are available units, that's why we're having this lottery process. So it's only open to households whose annual income is up to 80% of the area median income, and these units will remain affordable for the life of the property. So they won't change, after a year or two or anything. They're going to stay affordable units for the duration. So I've covered a lot of kind of logistical things. Does anybody have questions on anything that I've gone over so far? I'm going to move on to the kind of eligibility aspects of the affordable program. Yep, Janine.
Hi, thank you. I'm Janine. I'm curious. I want to make sure I understand this clearly. The 1 bedroom is $1,609, and you're having a lottery. Now, are there discounted for people on disability, or is it the same rent for everybody?
Yeah, this is the rent. That will be the rent regardless of anyone's situation. The only exception to that is if you have a Section 8 or an MRVP voucher, some sort of rental voucher that you have. If you're using the voucher at the property, your voucher agency, the agency that administers your voucher, is still going to be giving, is going to be calculating your actual rent share, because if you have a voucher, there is another entity that's paying part of your rent. But yeah.
And I did hear you say, I thought I heard you say two different things. I thought I heard you say the rent can go up after a year, and then I thought I heard you say that the rent won't go up. So can you please?
So the rent can increase once per year, but it cannot increase during your lease term. So if you sign a lease, for example, for August 1st, your rent will not change until at least August 1st of 2026. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And then there's a question here. When you're looking at income, is it net or gross? It's gross. I'll get into that in just a second. Yep. The program, unfortunately, requires us to determine applicants' eligibility based off of gross income, even though, most of us are not taking home gross pay from an employer. All right. So the eligibility criteria for the affordable housing program is what I'm going to talk about next. So there's 4 eligibility requirements. Those are listed in the information packet. Oh, I should mention too that the information packet that's on our website that you might have seen elsewhere as well has most of the information that I'm going to be presenting tonight. So if you want to review that after the fact, or if you just aren't familiar with the form and you want to look at it afterwards, just know that that's available in writing as well. All right, so the first eligibility criteria for the affordable housing program is that households need to have qualifying income. So the parameters are kind of on your screen right now. The maximum income limit is based off of household size, and then the approximate minimum income if you don't have a voucher that's listed here. So I'll go over a lot more about that in just a minute. The second item to keep in mind for eligibility purposes is that household priority will be given based off of household composition. So what that means is if you're a one-person household, or maybe you're a couple that shares a bedroom, you're generally considered to be a type 1 household. So you can apply for a 2-bedroom apartment, but any larger type 2 households are going to be placed ahead of you on that 2-bedroom waiting list. So generally, if a household has more occupants in it, they're going to have priority for larger units than you might if you're a single person when we're creating the waiting lists after the lottery. And then the third eligibility criteria, households can't own a home upon move-in. So if you own a home now, you would need to sell the home or be off the deed prior to completing your program certification with SCB Housing, which is what you would be doing right before you sign a lease. And then fourth, it doesn't come up very often, but applicants can't have financial interest in the development. So you can't be considered what the program refers to as a related party. That would mean if you work for the developer or the management company, you wouldn't be eligible for this lottery. Just one other question here. Will balcony units be included in the 30 affordable housing ones? I don't know that offhand. And I don't even know if the developer told us that. So Amanda, if you could email info@scbhousing.com, I will get that information for you tomorrow at the latest, but just make sure to shoot us an email and I can write back to you. So I'll have your email address there. All right, so to circle back on the first eligibility criteria, how we count income. So these are affordable units. They're going to be made available at rents that are lower than the market rate rents of very similar or even identical units within the community. And like I mentioned, you don't need to submit verification of income to get into this lottery, but I do want to give you an idea of what you'll need to submit eventually if you're one of the top households on the waiting list that's moving forward to program certification, which is when you have to submit your pay stubs and all of that. So if you are found eligible for this lottery, you're going to be provided with what's called the documentation requirements guide. And it's basically just a packet. It's going to be sent to you by email or as a hyperlink so you can access it. And it's going to give you, it's going to detail exactly what types of documentation we're going to need. So how many pay stubs, how many bank statements, all of that. And just keep that in mind. So you will have more information on what you should be gathering for eventually submitting it to SEB Housing. So I already said this, but income for the program is a projection of your income over the next 12 months. It's your gross income for everyone in the household. That includes things like bonuses, overtime, things that we may not rely on each year. But the only exceptions to that are if you have someone in your household who's under 18, so a minor that's earning a wage, we're not going to count their wage income. If you have dependent full-time students who are working, we would only be counting the first $480 of their wages. So for example, if you had like a 20-year-old living with you, but they're still considered a dependent and are a full-time student, most of their income is not going to be counted. And like I said, it's that gross income, the amount that you make before taxes, that needs to be counted. So how we calculate your income for eligibility isn't one size fits all because everyone's circumstances are unique. So some applicants have a weekly salary. They're going to have a weekly pay stub that is consistent throughout the year. But then there's also people who are self-employed or people who are working seasonally. In those circumstances, we might need to look further into the past to be able to project what your anticipated income is for the next 12 months. So that might mean, we need more pay stubs from you if you are self-employed or working seasonally. And actually, if you're self-employed, you're going to need to complete a profit and loss statement and provide supporting documentation for your business expenses. But if you're not self-employed, it is that gross income that we need to count. So in general, any income that you have been making, we're going to need to assume that you're going to continue making it going forward, unless there's some sort of definitive documentation showing us that you're no longer at a job that was listed on your tax returns last year, for example, or if there's a written letter from your employer saying, bonuses are not going to be paid out this year or anything like that. So official documentation like that we would be able to consider. And then when you're filling out your application, if this is online or by paper, it doesn't matter, just make sure that you're completing it and listing all of your income. So not just wages, but if you have anybody in your household who's receiving Social Security, pension, payments, child support, any of that sort of thing, just make sure that that's all listed so it is known up front what you will need to submit to verify that. So I mentioned this minimum income here. The program itself, like the affordable housing program, doesn't have a minimum income. That's why it says approximate minimum income here. Most management teams, so leasing offices, including the one at Slade Farm, wants to be sure that all of the tenants who are renting an apartment, regardless of whether or not they're renting a affordable unit or a market rate unit, they want to make sure that tenants can afford the rent. So the management company has set a minimum household income equivalent to 2.5 times the monthly rent. So those are the amounts that you see there. If you're looking to rent a 1-bedroom apartment, your household would need to make around at least $48,000. If you're looking to rent a 2-bedroom, that would be $52,500. And it is really up to the leasing office whether or not you meet the minimum income amount, because it is not a program requirement, but it's a requirement that they are imposing. So if, for example, you have a lot of liquid assets that you're able to draw from to be able to pay the rent, and they know that, they may be able to approve you as a tenant who has a little bit less than the amount here. But these maximum income limits are set in stone by the program, the affordable program. So if you're a 1-person household that makes $70,000, you won't be eligible for this lottery because your total household income is higher than the $64,050 maximum. The only exception to these minimum incomes, if you have a subsidy like Section 8 or MRVP, like I mentioned before, you can disregard these approximate minimum incomes because the agency that administers your voucher is going to be picking up a portion of your rent each month. So you can disregard those. There is no asset limit for rental opportunities. So you can have a significant amount of money in the bank. Maybe you're retired. That is perfectly fine. We're not counting that as income unless you have a bank account that is earning income off of interest. So a portion of that interest would be counted. For most people, that's not a whole lot, but just know that that is why we still need to ask for bank statements and things like that, even though there is no limit to the amount of assets you can have. And the same thing, there's going to be a section on the online application. If you haven't filled it out already, you'll see that there is an asset section. So you want to fill that out to the best of your knowledge as well. Any questions on eligibility criteria? The next section here, I'm going to talk about the lottery itself and what to expect there. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in this opportunity, you should go ahead and apply, get your application in as soon as possible to get the process started. I do want to mention too that you can apply for more than one unit size. So you'll see that when you're filling out the application. If you think you'd be interested in both a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom, for example, you should indicate that on the application. There's really no downside to applying for more than one unit size. There is a potential downside to not indicating that you might be interested in two unit sizes, because later if you decide, actually I would have been interested in a 2-bedroom as well, not just a 3, you're going to be at the bottom of that waiting list if you decide after the lottery that you'd be interested in another unit size. So apply for any of them that you think you will be interested in. We're going to review your lottery application. We're going to contact you if there's any information missing, or if anything appears to be incorrect, you'll be able to resubmit it to us. Keep in mind that when you're filling out the online application, you get that instantaneous kind of like bounce back email saying we received an entry from you, but that doesn't mean that your lottery application has been reviewed by SCB Housing yet. You might be filling it out at 10 o'clock at night or something, and we'll review it within about a week or so and let you know if we have any questions. And if you are eligible for the lottery, you'll get a more personalized email that has a lottery application number attached to it. So, for example, if you filled out your application this week, Monday, Tuesday, it hasn't been reviewed likely by SCB Housing staff yet, but you'll get a more personalized email. And like I said, if you get the email from us saying that you're eligible for the lottery, you're going to see a lottery application number in that email. You're going to want to hold on to that number because that's the number that's going to be drawn in the lottery. So as you can see on your screen, that lottery application number is going to be in the form of a series of numbers. It's just meant to be an anonymous identifier that's going to be called during the lottery. It's not a ranking of any sort at this point. It just corresponds with the order in which your application was approved. So if you were the very first person to submit and be approved for Slade Farm residences for this lottery, your number would be A.001. The email that you receive with that lottery application number will also confirm whether or not your application indicated that you are a resident of Somerset, or that you have a household member who works full-time within the town. Anybody who indicated that they have local preference, meaning that they either work full-time in the town, are a resident, or have a child that's attending Somerset Public Schools, could have local preference. So you want to make sure you're filling that out correctly if you fall into that category, because some of the units are going to have, some of the waiting lists for these units are going to have local preference, which means that households who have local preference will have positions ahead of non-local preference households on the waiting list. The email that you receive with your lottery application number, it's also going to confirm the bedroom sizes that you applied for, whether or not you indicated you need an apartment with special features. So you want to make sure you're reviewing that email that comes through and confirming that all of that information looks accurate to you. So if you get an email from us and it shows that you applied for a 1-bedroom, but you actually only applied for a 3, definitely make sure that we are aware of any errors. And if you're found to be ineligible for the lottery at any point, maybe you're over income, but maybe there was a typo in your online application, you want to make sure that you contact us right away so we can make any corrections that we need to the application that was submitted. And then a question here just came in: how do you apply for an apartment at market rate? I don't know if the leasing office is available yet for applying for a market rate, but they have a website, sladefarmresidences.com. So you should be able to find their like general contact information there. They might even, they either have a, contact information, like I said, or some of these apartments have a kind of like an online submission form that you can inquire about market rates. But yeah, if that information isn't available yet, then it will be soon, because they'll be ready to work with applicants this summer. All right. The lottery drawing itself will be on July 23rd. It's going to be in the same format as this. It's a Zoom meeting at 6 p.m. And there'll be a screen share, so you're able to see the drawing. It will be done electronically, meaning that the lottery is conducted using a website called random.org. So that allows for instantaneous lottery results. So the lottery numbers are basically randomized on the computer, and the results of the drawing are shared. And every lottery number is drawn or picked in the lottery. Sometimes when you think of lotteries, you think of, there's only 30 apartments, so they're going to draw 30 numbers. But that's not the purpose of this lottery. It's more to establish an order of priority on the waiting list. So there's going to be more than 30 households who are screened in order to fill these apartments, because there's going to be people who maybe are no longer interested anymore. There's going to be households who don't qualify. So just know that if you're not, at the very top of these waiting lists, that doesn't mean that you won't have the opportunity to move forward in the process. During the lottery itself, too, you're not going to know what your placement is on the waiting list, even if you attend that lottery session. And that's because after the lottery drawing, I need to sort the results of the lottery onto the waiting list. So, for example, if a type 1 household is drawn first in the lottery, but they've only applied for a 2-bedroom apartment, they're still going to be behind all of those type 2 households on the 2-bedroom waiting list. And then also, like I said, there might be households who are found to be ineligible later on in the process. So if your number is drawn pretty far down and you're towards, the middle of the waiting list, it doesn't mean that you won't be eventually contacted to move forward in the process. And so, like I said, after the lottery, I'll populate the waiting list. I'm going to take local preference into consideration, whether or not your household needs a disabled accessible apartment. And then we usually are able to send out the waiting list to everyone in the lottery that same evening. So if the lottery is at 6 p.m., you might get an email from us at 10 p.m. with the waiting list attached and then more information on next steps. When you're reviewing that email, you're going to be able to find your lottery application number. And at that point, you'll be able to see where you fall on each waiting list. And then you'll have a better idea as to whether or not you'll be moving forward to the next step in the process. So following the lottery, you're going to be in contact, and you're going to also be given the information to contact the leasing office to move on to the lease screening process if you are one of those top households on the waiting list. So you'll have about 5 days to connect with them and initiate that lease screening process. Remember that SCB Housing screens for your lottery eligibility and also the Affordable Housing Program eligibility, but it's the leasing office that's going to be doing the lease screening. So You know, this is the part in the process which could include credit check, rental history check, background check, that sort of thing, to determine whether or not your family is eligible to rent with them. So be aware that the leasing office is likely going to invite more households to complete the lease screening than there are available apartments. So for example, there's 6, 2-bedroom affordable units. There's going to be more than 6 households invited forward to complete the lease screening. Management companies usually do that because the process of leasing units is usually slowed down by households, who don't qualify. Not everyone who is moving on to that portion of the screening is going to be eligible. So once you are lease approved, that's the point in the process where having a position near the top of the waiting list is beneficial. Because if you're the top household on any given waiting list, you're going to have the first chance to reserve an affordable apartment. So if you have the top position on the 1-bedroom waiting list, you're going to have the first choice at reserving any of the 1-bedroom affordable units. And that's true even if someone behind you on the waiting list happens to complete their lease eligibility first. The management team needs to honor the order of the waiting list as they're reserving the apartment. So you'll be able to tour the apartments, make your decision based off of whatever factors are important to you. Maybe you want to live in a certain part of the building, on a certain floor. You'll be able to do that. So once the first person on the waiting list has secured a unit, has reserved it, then the second person on the waiting list gets to choose from the remaining apartments and so on. Once you've reserved one of the affordable apartments, the leasing office is going to notify SCB Housing and will then contact you to coordinate the submission of all of your income, asset, and tax documentation. That would be the point in the process now that you have to submit all of that. So we can do your program eligibility review. Hopefully at that point, you've been able to take a look at the documentation requirements guide that I mentioned that kind of gave you a heads up on the information that you would need to submit. You'll have about 10 days to get the information into us, and there's a lot of information to provide. So honestly, most people don't get everything in on the first attempt, and that's perfectly fine. An incomplete notice will be sent to you by email, and you'll be able to work with us to get that information in. We want to make sure that we're giving everyone enough time to get everything and be transparent. So once SCB Housing approves your file, we'll notify you, and eligible households will then be able to sign leases and establish a move-in date with the leasing office. And then once you're leased, you're done with screening until your lease renewal date. So at that point, we hope that you've loved, living at Slade Farm. You want to continue living there beyond the first year of your lease. If you do, then you need to recertify your income with the leasing office prior to your lease renewal. So an example of that would be, if you sign a lease for August 1st, probably around this time next year, or even maybe in May, you would be contacted by the leasing office to do your recertification, which could include submitting pay stubs to them, just confirming your income to confirm your eligibility for the affordable unit. If your income has increased within the year, that's fine. Households remain eligible for the affordable unit at the affordable price, as long as your income doesn't exceed 140% of the area median income. So to give an example of that, in order to qualify for this lottery, a household of 2 would qualify if your income was at or below $73,200. That same family next year, though, if your income goes up to 140% of the area median income for Somerset, you could make up to $102,480 at the time of your recertification in order to still be eligible for that affordable apartment. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there if you have, a raise or, get a different job that is higher paying, for example. It doesn't mean that you would need to now pay market rent. So that kind of covers everything that I wanted to get through from the information packet, and just in general, kind of the eligibility lottery process. Any questions that I didn't get to that you have on any of these topics? Application deadline is July 8th. Still got a little bit of time. And again, we encourage you to complete the application online if you are able to. That's going to be the easiest way or the quickest way to get your information over to us. Hold on one second here. So SCB Housing's website is what I was referring to, David. So scbhousing.com is how you would get to our how you would get to the online application where this link is. So if you were to go to scbhousing.com and click on affordable housing opportunities and click on rent, that's where you're going to see that job form. And then a question here, can you explain again, if you own a home, what happens? So you can apply right now and own a home. You just want to indicate that on your lottery application. And then you would need to be off the deed of that home, meaning you would basically have to sell it before you were signing a lease or doing your program eligibility with SCB Housing. So if you own a home now, you can still apply, but say around 2 months from now, you would need to not be on the deed of that home anymore in order to be eligible. Yep, where can you review the recording of this meeting? So it's going to be uploaded within the next half hour or so. It's going to be on our website. It's also going to be on SCB Housing's YouTube channel. Any other questions? All right, I appreciate everyone's participation. We look forward to getting your application. If you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free, if you didn't think of it tonight, to email us at info@scbhousing.com. That's kind of our general email address there. Yep, the lottery is on July 23rd. So if you go to the information packet, that's also listed on our website. There is a password and link to the lottery. Anything else? All right, thanks again, everyone. We look forward to getting your application, and any questions in the meantime, please reach out to us. Thank you. Have a good evening.